This better be good after, after all that. It is great to be back in Croatia, back in Zagreb. We first came in 1996, I think. Yeah, 95, 96. But we've been back a couple of times, and it's great to be back in Zagreb. It's one of the few places in the world where when I come and I walk through the city, that as I see people, I have to look up. Because I don't know what you have in the water here in Croatia, but they just like trees, you know. Where's Marco? He's one of these trees, right? Every time I see Marco, he's another, 2 centimeters, which is why I think, you have so many great basketball players that come from this part of the world. But we're excited to be here. So this is our workshop. We're going to talk a little bit about, this is a Hebrew term. So if you're looking, you go, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. That's okay, because we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. But we really want to talk about the way that God has designed our marriage and how we as husbands and wives can understand the design of marriage, as God is this great engineer and architect, and he makes things in very specific ways. And when we understand how he makes things, then we can understand how we can use those things that he makes and how it works for us in our marriage. So we're excited about that. We'll introduce a little bit about ourselves. Which way do I point? There?
You just click.
There we go. Yeah, right. That's us. You already see us, but we want to tell you a little bit more about the rest of us and our family. Caryn's going to share a little bit about our family.
So these are our 3 daughters. Jessica is the middle. She is a software engineer who lives in Seattle, Washington. She works for Disney. It's fun, right? And then Sarah is the oldest. She lives in New York, and she's an artist. So she's a musician and writes music. And then Caitlin, the youngest, is 26, and she lives in Richmond, which is 2 hours from us, so the closest one. The other ones are very far. And she's also a software engineer. So we don't know where they got those brains. I don't think either one of us has that brain, but anyway, they do.
It's a gene that skips a generation. It must be. It's the biology. And
I'm just very proud of the women that they are. They're very independent, and they're living their best lives. Love them. Do you want me to on the next one?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Our family is not complete until we add Clover.
That's my dog, who I love with all my heart. She's my baby. Because I don't have any grandchildren. None of my daughters are married. They're 30, 28, and 26.
Notice the dressing on the dog.
Yeah. So anyway, when I go to the store, if I see baby things, I have to look away because it's hard for me. I'm just saying, right? But I go to the pet section and I buy clothes. She has a wardrobe that may be more clothes than you have. I don't know. For every holiday, for every weather. Anyway, it's kind of ridiculous. So I do need a grandchild that would maybe solve that problem.
God, we pray. So as you look at this picture, this is us in our best clothes, in one of our best moments. We're all like dressed up and cleaned up, and this is actually, I think, a wedding, my sister's wedding. So you go to a wedding, you show up as the best version of yourself. But we're here to tell you that this does not tell you the whole story of us and our family.
So I know that for me, when I've been to marriage things before, or parenting things, where people have tried to help, but I can say to this point, I've never been helped by a perfect family, or a perfect marriage, or perfect parenting. Because I feel it's so far, it's so out of reach that it's almost discouraging, right? So we want to tell you and show you that we come with a lot of imperfections. We come with things that are wrong, that are broken, right? That only God can heal. Only God can make into a victory. So in our family, we've had mental illness, very serious, to the point where we had to switch jobs and focus on one of our children. Very, very serious, where she was in the hospital many times, some suicide attempts and things like that. So I don't know if any of you have family members who suffer from that, but it's very, very challenging. Also, Brian and I, actually, sometimes you meet people and it just seems like, oh, they have such an easy marriage. We do not have an easy marriage naturally. God brought together two of us who have very strong opinions about everything, and most of those opinions are about little things that don't matter. Really, that's the source of our, we agree on everything important, and I'm so grateful for that, because we agree on how we see God and the Bible and the way that we want to be with people, and we really do have to share that vision. We both love to travel, and we both love living in Europe, and we've lived in Europe 3 different places, and it's been a joy. But the little things, like dishes or little tiny opinion issues, right, that aren't even important, can become the bigger issues for us. And we've really had to work on that. And we're going to share some of the things that we've been working on to help in those areas, right?
Let me just say here, so when we first met in Boston, it was love at first sight for me. We met and we had a great conversation. Of course, she's beautiful, that goes without saying. But it was so much more than that. When we spent time together, we had conversation, we had coffee, and I just thought, I just love her heart, her spirit, the way she loves God, the way she loves her friends, the way she loves children. Caryn has this huge heart, and she has all this energy. And I can be kind of reserved, and my heart can be a little bit back behind some protection, and I can be serious, but maybe not enjoying the moments as much. And so I think part of what I saw in Caryn was, wow, she has so much energy and spark and life, and I really loved that and connected to that. Now, the good news is it took some time, but Caryn got to the right place, right? So we got
3 years.
Yes, and we ended up in this moment. This is us in a beach. Yes, in Massachusetts, where there was much more hair involved.
For both of us.
For both of us, yes. I'll have Caryn explain her hair, but no.
There's no explanation.
It was a time in history, right? It was a decade.
It was coming out of the 80s.
Yeah, so just look up the 80s on the internet and you'll understand what's going on here. But this is me asking Caryn to marry me, right? So this is our engagement, and of course, thank God she said yes. And it was such a beautiful moment. It was a beautiful day. And of course, everything we think in that moment is all good, and God is blessing us, and He was, and we're going to have this great life together, and it's all going to be almost like this story that you might see on Disney, right? But what we learned pretty quickly after, we got married and we spent more time together and really got to know each other more, and we found, like, wait a minute, we really are different, because we started to react very differently to, as she said, sometimes a lot of even small situations. And I would react in one way and she would react in another way. I would react if there was something that we were disagreeing, and if there was something where she's getting emotional, I would just shut down and put a wall around, because I just didn't want to deal with this, what it felt like, this chaos. And it took me years to kind of learn that had more to do with my past and things, how I grew up, and in our family was very traditional, very quiet. We didn't really talk about things that we were feeling. We just, we were close and we didn't fight, but we didn't really talk. And we didn't really share our feelings. And my parents were divorced, and I grew up really with my mother, and that was just her personality. And then if there was an emotion, it was one emotion, and it was a storm of anger. After I had done enough things over time where she got really mad, and then there would be this, and then I would want to hide from that storm. So for me, I learned to connect the idea of emotion with like a negative energy and something to protect from and something to hide from. So if we're dealing with something and Caryn is getting emotional and she'll share her story, my tendency would be to close up.
Yeah. So we come from very, very different families. So just because we are from the same country does not mean that we have the same cultural experience, right? So I grew up with 6 kids in my family, Irish Catholic family, and very, very emotional. Very emotional. And we just said what we thought at the moment, always. Like, you always knew where you stood. There was never a question. You felt something, you said it. And you said it with emotion. But then as soon as you got it out, you were good. And you could just go on from there. It was resolved because you got it out. And so when I tried to do that in my relationship with Brian, and he started to close up, I was like, what is going on here? And I felt afraid, like he doesn't listen. And I actually became even more emotional because of that, because I felt like he's not getting it, so I have to say it louder and more emotional. And so that was not good.
Now, God helped us, and we'll tell more of that story as we go through, but we just want you to get to know sort of our story a little bit. It's really been because the work that God has done in us and the work that we've done to try to learn about ourselves, about each other, and about how God has designed marriage, it really has been a lot of work, but it's good work and it's God's work, and that's what we're here to talk about today. This is our theme scripture. If we had sort of one theme scripture, we're going back to the book of Genesis, which means we're going back to the beginning. And I think if you really want to understand something, you should go back to the source, right? You should go back to the beginning. You should go back to the design so that we can understand that. And I think Chris, my friend over here, as a builder, he used to build things. You have to have a good design, and then you build on the design. And so here in Genesis, we get this information from God, from his word, about how he's created man and woman. So we understand already God has created man, God has created woman, and then the Lord said it is not good for the man to be alone. Amen. I will make a helper suitable for him. And this word helper is the word that we're going to focus on in this workshop. Helper is an English translation. I'm not sure what you have in your Croatian Bible or whatever version that you're reading, but the English translation often is the word helper. We're going to talk about the actual Hebrew word, right? So we're going to the source, so we want to understand the original language and the original meaning of the original language so we can understand God's design. But if we just go with the English translation, we can get the wrong idea. And the wrong idea can be, thank you, God, that you have created me as a man, and thank you, God, that you have created a wife who is here to help me. So maybe I will sit down over here and expect my wife to help me. And culturally, that can be an answer. Historically, honestly, a lot of times in culture, that has been the answer. And it is based on a wrong understanding. First of all, it's based on cultural ideas, not biblical ideas. But it also can be a wrong understanding of what the Bible is actually saying. So this word helper, the Hebrew word, it's actually 2 words together. It's ezer and kenegdo. Now, ezer by itself, you could say is a helper. That's one translation, right? But there's more to it, and a more accurate translation might be rescuer. Rescuer, one who rescues. And actually in the Bible, when you look at other references to that word, the other times that it shows up in the Bible, it's often in the context of battle, of battle, right? So it's like a warrior who comes in and rescues the people or the army or the city from the attack. And in fact, in the Bible, in Hosea chapter 13, God himself is described as an Ezer, and his mission to rescue us. So it's a very powerful word that God attributes to his creation, the woman, right? So there's this powerful rescuer, helper, partner, and then this kenegdo word is an interesting word. It actually means like opposition, like against, pushing against, and it's an odd companionship of these two words. Because on the one hand, you have helper, rescuer, I'm here to, make things better. And then this other word that has to do with resistance and opposition. And so the way that the rabbis in the Jewish tradition understood this and the way they would teach this, it's like if you had two pieces of wood, like two boards, that you're going to make something out of. And if you took, and they're laying on the ground, if you take one and put it like this, and the other put it this, and you put the boards leaning on each other, the two pieces of wood leaning on each other, now they're both standing up. Now they're both rising up. Now they're both, in a stronger, higher position. But what creates that is the tension. It's the opposition between the two elements. And so we're helping through contrasting forces, which is a really interesting concept. And so those differences that are in us, that can be the source of conflict and separation, actually in the design of God, are supposed to be a source of support and a connection if we do it in the right way.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but a lot of, in the past, I've seen a lot of marriages where it's not so much this way, but it's just this. Two people living their lives.
Separate lives.
Separate lives. One person just doing what they do, the other person doing what they do. There's not an impact on each other. The one person isn't helping that other person by pushing against, and the other isn't pushing against the other. And when I think about my relationship with Brian, I believe that because we have this, I am going to help him get to heaven. And he is going to help me get to heaven. I mean, that is literally the power of this, is helping each other to be more and more like Christ. But if I don't ever say anything to him, he's just going to go his sinful nature. If he doesn't ever challenge me or go, I'm going to do my sinful nature. So that's one example. Another example is a man who just overpowers the wife and doesn't listen, right? And I think we all know examples of that too, and that can be very harmful to the woman. And it actually is harmful for the man because he's not allowing what God created to help him. He's overpowering. But we've also seen examples of a woman who actually takes that role and overpowers the man, squashes him, and that is definitely not going to work. It undermines his confidence, ability, everything. So it's amazing to me because these two are equal, right? And even to God, they're equal, but there are different roles, and that's okay. It's okay to be different and equal at the same time. And I love how the Bible gives us that example to help me know what I can be for my husband.
And what culture wants to do, especially in today's world, is anything, you want to see everything in the same value, which I think is a godly perspective. Because God has the same love and the same value for men, for women, for all people, races, ethnicities, right? God has, we know this from the Bible, the same heart, the same love, the same value for each person. But I think the world misunderstands and thinks like if there's differences, like if a man is different than a woman and has a different role or a different personality or if a woman is different than a man, has different aspects, different strengths, maybe different weaknesses, then that's wrong. And so we need to create like one version, right? And it's not a man, and it's not a woman, and it's not black, and it's not white, and it's not from here, and it's not from there. But we miss the beauty of God's creation, that God did create us different, and that's okay, and that's beautiful. And in fact, it's intended to come together and create something more and something stronger. And these are marriage principles, but these are not just marriage principles. Not everybody here is married. These are also relationship principles that work really in any community, in the church community, in our neighborhoods, in our friendships, in our own families. These are principles that we respect and understand there's differences, and that God has combined them in an interesting way. Now, we told you about the rabbis have their picture of the two woods. This is a picture that I thought of, which is the design of a helicopter. Now, a helicopter is a very specific instrument that's designed to do very specific things. It doesn't need like an airport with a long runway to take off and to land like an airplane. It can take off and land from a single spot, right? And that then it's designed to be able to do certain things that nothing else can do. And the way that a helicopter works is there's actually these rotors, right, two blades, and they're actually pulling in different directions. One is pulling up and one is pulling to the side. And it's like these two different forces that are moving in different directions, but they're designed in such a way as to work together to be able, so the helicopter can function. And if you lose one of those blades, the helicopter will not be able to fly. It will crash. Either it'll spin because it's lost the tail blade, or it'll go crash down because it's lost the other blade. So it actually needs the opposing forces to create lift and stability, and now it's designed, right, to do what it's designed to do. So this is the idea, if we apply this principle to marriage, that God has designed us in a way with these different personalities and with these different forces, but it's created for a purpose, to glorify God, to make a positive difference in the world around us, to raise families and communities. So there's two ideas that we're talking to today about. And the first is that marriage is God's work. And then we're going to talk about our part. Marriage is hard work. That's our part. But the first idea that we've already introduced, right, is the idea that marriage is God's work. So I wanted to spend a little bit more time in Genesis. We saw chapter 2, where the idea of man and woman coming together in the spirit of Ezer Kenegdo. Now we're in Genesis 1, so we're going a little bit earlier in the story and looking at how God created each of us, mankind, man and woman. So it says in the English version, then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over the creatures that move along the ground. So God created, right? He's the engineer. He's the architect. He is the source. God made us. God created mankind. So that word Adam in the Bible actually means man and woman, right? Because it's mankind. It's humanity. So it includes both. God created Adam, mankind, in his own image. What is God's image? Look at the first verse. Let us make. So there's a whole class we can do about why does God say let us instead of let me? Right? Because God is plural. in the sense that it's the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. It's one God in 3 dimensions, which is a great Bible study due in its own. The important idea here is that God, when he creates us in his image, he is the perfect image of a relationship working in harmony for purpose. So he created us in his own image, in the image of God. He created them, male and female, he created them. So we're not going to listen to what culture says, that the idea that there's, it's a male and a female in the created scheme is somehow false narrative and we can change all that. That's not true. God says he created us in his image. He created man and woman. But it's just a beautiful picture that we are created in the image of God. Right? And it's like with our own children. If you have children, when you have a baby, you look, oh, he's got mommy's eyes, or he's got daddy's nose, our child, our baby is created in our image, and we cherish that and we celebrate that. But we are God's creation. He has created us in his image, and that's a beautiful thing. So we should understand that God has designed us. We want to understand that design, but we understand that when we are created by God and created in his image, it is a beautiful thing. God created a beautiful thing when he created you. God created a beautiful thing when he created your marriage, if you're married today. What God creates is good. Now, we have work to do to make sure that we understand and how to live out that good calling, that good design. But what he has created is good. So that's God's creation. Did you want to? No, anymore. Okay. So let's talk about our part. We want to talk about God's part first, and then now we can talk about our part. That marriage is hard work. And after 33 years, I can say, yes, it is. But it's the best work. It's work that's really worth doing. Now, this represents how I felt as a young husband. When I first, with my long hair, said, Caryn, be my wife, I felt like I am going to protect you, and I'm going to make this marriage fantastic, and I'm going to lead you to the best world that we can create together. That was my spirit as a newly married young man. And then after a little while, when I realized my mistakes and my brokenness, I felt a little bit more like this. Coming into the marriage, I'm not sure what to do. How do I make this work? Right? And so this is part of what God does too. He makes us more humble so we can learn. So God has done a lot of things in my life to make me more humble so that I can learn how to be the man that he created me to be, and the husband that he created me to be. This is going to be the verse that we look at as we talk about more practically what is our part, what does the work look like. And of course, we could spend a whole day or a whole weekend or a whole week talking about different concepts and different elements that are good for relationship building and good for marriage development and good for conflict resolution. But in our small time today, we want to concentrate on just one idea here that has many expressions. And the one idea here is from Ephesians 4, 1 through 6. Would you feel comfortable reading it?
As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all.
So last night we had a nice dinner with Marco and Maria. They had us over to their home, and they're amazing people. They work very hard. They have regular jobs, but then they also have a little bit of a farm that they also take care of and grow fruits and vegetables. And so you know, and anybody else who works, has a garden, maybe who grows flowers or grows vegetables or fruits, understands that our job, if that's the work, is to create the conditions for the seed to grow, whatever seeds there are. And so we worry about the soil, and we worry about the light, and we worry about the moisture, and about the temperature, and the minerals, right? And Darko, maybe this would be the part that you could teach, because you know more specifically. But the goal is, I want to create the conditions where the seed can grow. And I think it's a lot in this principle as it applies to marriage. Ephesians chapter 4 gives us, in a way, the climate, the environment that we need in order to do the work of building our relationship, in order to do the work of building our marriage. And so there's ideas here that we want to talk more specifically about. What does that sort of look like practically in our lives, some things from our own experiences that might be helpful to you as well. So I've highlighted some of the words: humble, gentle, patient, bearing with each other, and making every effort. So these are the ideas that we're going to explore in this part of the workshop. So this first idea is the idea of being humble. That's the first expression, that we're called to be humble. And so there's a lot of ideas that we could talk about here, but the one thing that we wanted to talk about at this place, the humility to pause and to try to learn more about our own story and more about each other and their story. We started the workshop today talking a little bit about our family backgrounds that are very different. And her family background helped create the kind of person that she is, and how she thinks and how she acts in different situations. Just like my family background helped create the kind of person I am, the kind of personality I have, and things that I care about, and things that I react to. We each have our own stories. And I remember in my story, as I began to learn, and I began to feel a little sad and upset, like, oh, in my family, we didn't feel a lot of emotional love. We didn't express things. We didn't share our feelings. And so as I began to learn this, my first reaction was to be mad about that. Mad at my mom and my dad. You didn't give us this kind of love. Although they supported us and loved us in their own way, in a great way. But then what I learned, as I began to ask more questions, I began to realize, oh, they also have their own stories. When my grandmother died, this is the mother of my mother, when she died quite a number of years ago, and we were visiting the family together. So it was my mother and her sister and her brother, and we were all sort of, staying together in my grandparents' house, and we were going to go have a memorial service, right, to remember her the next couple of days. And it was so quiet. Nobody really talked, except for, what should we do today? Maybe I'll get the sandwiches today. Oh, I'll get this. I mean, all about practical things. But nobody talked about what was going on and about how they felt that they just lost their mother. And I remember telling my mom, I said, at the memorial service, because I was asked to read a passage from the Bible. As a minister, she said, can you read 1 Corinthians 13? And I said, yes, of course I can do that. But when I read it, maybe I'll also share a couple of thoughts and memories that I have about her. And my mother, her face went white. And she got very cold. And she said, you will not do this. She said, there's a very delicate emotional balance right now, and you're not going to break it. And then I learned her story she wasn't comfortable with that. She didn't grow up with that. She didn't know how to process that. Because after that, you know what she told me? She said, but why don't you get with your brother and sisters, and as you talk, you can share stories, and you can talk about your memories. Because I think that is really important. And then I realized she just didn't know how to do it. It wasn't a part of her story. And so she didn't have that to give to me, and that became a part of my story. And so it just helped me to learn that we all have our own histories and we all have our own stories. And I need to have the humility to slow down and try and understand what's my story? Why am I the way I am? Why do I react to little stupid things so strongly? You know, why do I have such a strong opinion about that? There's reasons if I look and study that. And then as with Caryn, you know, why does she react the way that she does? Why does she get emotional when she does? Why does she act this way or that way? Instead of judging her, which is my first reaction, like I did with my parents, let me try to understand her and where she's coming from and why she maybe acts in those ways. And so when we learn our own stories and each other's stories, we can then understand better how we are and how we can grow, going back to the Bible.
I think for me, I grew up with my father was a minister. He and my mother were very tight. Like they were closer, they were first, and the children were, the 6 children were, you know. And my father was a very loving man. So he would always, he did so much for my mom. He would serve her, he brought her coffee every day, he would cook for her. And she did a lot of work too. She was amazing, but she was not as emotional, right? So when I married Brian, and he wasn't as emotional as my father, I think I felt disappointed, and I felt like, why can't you be more like that? And I remember feeling frustrated in the beginning of our marriage, and just, I don't know, this isn't what I was hoping for. And even going home to visit, my father would say, it's okay, you can stay with us. You don't want to go back with him. That was so unhealthy, right? Oh.
Don't do that.
No. But I think it took me some time to realize I'm actually more like my father. And if I married someone like my father, that wouldn't be good. I needed someone like Brian, he shows his love in very different ways. He's a very faithful man. And honestly, I've been very encouraged over the years because he's actually grown so much in his love and showing love for me and finding the ways that I feel loved and changing for me because he loves me. And it's kind of like that as a connector. But a few years ago, I said it really means a lot, like when my father would bring my mother coffee every day. And then literally, I think it's been, how many years, 5? Every morning for 5 years, he brings me coffee in the morning. And I feel so loved. And it's like, that maybe wasn't what he was thinking, but because he was aware of my needs and he was working on trying to love me the way I wanted to be loved, it really helped me feel loved. And then when I know him better and where he comes from, he didn't grow up with a father. He didn't grow up with married parents. So how could he know what it should be like, right? I'm just so grateful for God's word that it shows us how. That any 2 people, if they apply God's scriptures, can have a good relationship. Because I do find that in marriages, for whatever reason, we think that the scriptures don't apply. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it's like that's the exception. You know, but he did this, so I can't be humble. Or he did that. No, the power is in God's word, right? For every relationship, whether you're co-workers or brother, sister, friends, but it certainly works in marriage.
I think for me, as we learn our own and each other's stories more, I actually get a better understanding of why God brought us together.
Yeah.
Right? So those, like we said at the beginning, those same differences that would lead to conflict for us, when we get a better understanding of God, a better perspective, when we learn about each other, and now we can come together in a different spirit and really understand that the differences are there to help us be more together than what we are by ourselves, right? But that does take work, and it takes going back to God and His Word. And it takes, again, creating the right environment for growth, like we talked about. So there's these words in the passage that are so powerful. You know, this idea of being gentle, and this idea of being patient, and you know, bearing with each other and being calm. Like, this is not, either one of us, we're not naturally this way, right? We're not. Like, without God, by myself, I'm not gentle and I'm not patient. I want to solve the problem now. I want to step forward, and if I feel like something is in the way of me stepping forward, I get very anxious and I want to push through. And one time in our lives, it almost created a disaster, honestly, for our family. I was driving the car in the winter, and there was a lot of snow on the ground, and we came up to some train tracks to cross, and so I was trying to cross, even though it was saying you should stop, but there was nothing there, and I just said, why? No, it wasn't saying you should stop. There was no, not yet. That came. There was a truck. There was a truck on the other side that was slowly moving, and I was like, oh, I don't want to just wait here for the truck to slowly move, so I'm going to cross over and then try to get around it. And literally, right when I tried to cross over, two things happened. One is the car got stuck in the snow on the railroad tracks, and at the same moment, it did start ding, 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 and the arm started to come down. This woman could be an Olympic athlete. How fast she got out of the car without saying a word, got to the back, unhooked our baby, who was in the back seat, grabbed her, and she was out in 2 seconds of the car. There's a train coming. We can see it. And I'm trying, you know, to get the car out. And I'm about to get out of the car and just get out of the way. And it felt to me like angels. The next car that was waiting had 4 men in it who all get out of the car and get behind and push. And then I got out and drove to the other side. Why did that happen? Because I was not this. I am not this in my nature. I want to go and you get out of the way. Of course, she was trying to help me with the right idea in that moment. So for me, this is work. I have to decide. God tells me to be gentle. God tells me to be patient. And by the way, there's good reasons for that. There's reasons for that, right? God is always, His design is to help us succeed in life and not get hit by trains when you don't need to be. So be gentle, be patient. And did you want to share anything on that? I don't remember anything. Well, share what you want. All right. Okay. So I learned a behavior that was just simple but powerful. Because my first reaction a lot of times is not gentle and it is not patient, and I will make maybe a very bad decision. And so I learned that when I start feeling tight, impatient, I need to stop. I tell myself, it's like in a game, if you're playing, you know, basketball or football or whatever sport you like, sometimes the coach or one of the players says, time out. Time out. We need to stop because we need to think. So I taught myself from God's word to call time out on myself. Stop. Think. Pray. Talk. And now then I can start to see more clearly because the anxiety and the impatience is lifting away. And so I need to create the right environment even for me to think and act and decide in a proper way.
I think for me, my lack of gentleness comes when I want to talk about something and he's not ready for it, I feel like I just need to get it out. I have a really hard time with that. Does anybody else have a hard time with that? So being gentle and patient is hard for me because I like to do everything fast. I like to just get it over with. And once it's over, I'm like, good. And a few years ago, I found myself in bed. Because I'm not patient and gentle, I fell down the stairs and I broke my leg in 3 places. And I was in a bed, I could not do much. And it was during COVID, and we were leading a church of about 500 people. So there were a lot of needs, a lot of things going on. My head was spinning. I couldn't get away from my thoughts. And Brian was serving me. He was bringing me all of my food, and really he took very good care of me. So I know if I get older and sick, he will definitely take good care of me. But when he would come in the room, it was like my chance to tell him what I was feeling and thinking, because I needed to talk to somebody, right? So he would come in and I'd go, and just get all of my anxiety out, cast all of my anxiety on him rather than God, right? And there was one point I was doing that, and he literally walked out of the room as I was talking. And I was in the bed and I couldn't move. And I was like, don't leave me! Brian, come back! And I was like screaming, come back! And I just felt like how could you just desert me in the middle of my need? But that was showing there is a problem in our relationship, where I was expecting him to just take on all of my anxiety, and I wasn't patient. I don't know if you want to share more about that, what we did.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so early on in our marriage, that would often happen, where I would just want to resolve something right away. Because you can't let the sun go down while you're angry, right? So I'd want to resolve it, talk about it now. And Brian would sometimes walk out, and I felt like he was leaving, and I felt like he was giving up on me. And there was a fear that I had, oh no, like he doesn't love me, he's leaving me, he doesn't want this to be resolved. When actually he did want it to be resolved, but he knew that was not the time. And I didn't have the wisdom to know that and to understand it. And that's when we started doing something called...
Yeah, why don't we come back to that specific idea?
Yeah, okay.
So this is the last part of that verse that we wanted to highlight. It talks about making every effort in Ephesians 4, this whole verse about relationships. By the way, Ephesians chapter 5 deals more specifically with marriages. And so in the next class with the men, I'm going to talk more about the ideas that come out of chapter 5. And also it has advice about parenting, the design for parenting. So lots of great information in the book of Ephesians. But this idea of make every effort, it says make every effort to keep unity. Make every effort to come together. And I don't know if you know this, but it seems like in the world there's so many things that are just pulling us apart. And it seems like more and more, there's just things that pull countries away from countries, pulls communities away from communities, pulls people away from people. There's just so many dividing forces. And God tells us to make every effort to be unified, to be one. So it is this understanding that it does take a lot of work. And so we want to share some of the practical things that have been helpful for us. Caryn started to share about one in the area of communication. So communication is so important to any relationship, and especially to marriage. And we can get very busy, especially if we're married and have kids, and all these things are happening. It's hard to give each other enough time and attention when it comes to communication. But communication is so important, and so we've made decisions in our marriage about communication on a daily basis, communication on a weekly basis, and communication just on a regular basis. So on a daily basis, you want to share about that idea?
Yeah. So after that episode with me yelling when he left the room and I was in bed, we realized there was an issue. And so we actually got some marriage counseling. We had one session, and that one session was life-changing for us. Because what she helped us to see is that I was speaking with so much emotion because I felt like Brian didn't have any emotion and I had to give it to him. If that makes sense, right? And then he was just so overwhelmed by my emotion because he felt like he needed to fix me, and there was no way to fix. So this is what she said, and it has changed our lives. She said, every day, have a check-in time, and where each of you shares how you're feeling about the day, coming up, share about just generally what you're feeling. The other person cannot say a word. And just listen, just listen. And what we decided to do is on even days, so we remember to do this, Brian shares first and then I share because he's more normal. And on odd days, I share because I'm not as normal. So that's how we remember the days. So
that was her idea, by the way. Not my idea.
I admit it, so it's fine. So today was the 20th, right on the way here, we had our check-in. So in the check-in, what happens is Brian will share how he's feeling. I can't tell you how many times I actually heard how he was feeling in general because he kind of kept it inside. So when he shares, I think he's feeling it. He feels it too. Like he feels something, and my heart would go out to him, and I would love him even more, and then I would not feel alone. Like he feels things too. And then after he shares, we kind of affirm. We don't say anything. We just kind of you can go like this and like touch, or you can just give a kiss, or you can just say thank you. And then it was my turn, and then I share, and he's not allowed to fix me. He's not allowed to say anything. And even at the end, we just say thank you, and we affirm each other again, kiss or just holding. It has really been life-changing for us because I feel like I have a little bit of a glimpse into his emotional world. He is able to hear me without it being out of control, and he doesn't feel like he has to fix me. All he needs is to listen, which is really what I wanted in the first place. I just wanted someone to listen. And so that's been great.
This is maybe 2 minutes,
Yeah.
right? It's very quick. I just share, here's how I'm doing, here's how, okay, good. So that's a daily check-in that's helped just be connected in our thinking and in our emotion. Of course, we have other conversations. There's a lot more to talk about, but that's just a daily discipline that's been helpful. On a weekly basis, every week we actually have like a meeting where we plan for the week, like what's going on, what's coming up, what needs to be done, who's going to do what. So we actually have like a meeting, and it's in our calendar. For us, it's on Mondays. Every Monday we take maybe 20 minutes. Sometimes it doesn't take that long, sometimes it takes longer. But we have a regular time to keep communicating about what's happening and what's coming. And it's just a very helpful discipline to help us be on the same page about things. Another thing that we do every week is we make sure that we spend just relationship time together where it's not a meeting and we're not talking about something specific, but we have like a date, a coffee, go to a movie, just enjoy each other. And especially when we had younger kids, that was a decision that we really had to, fight for. And, we had people that would help watch our kids, and we would help watch their kids when they would go out, so that we could just have time together as husband and wife on a regular basis. So that's something that we would also do on a weekly basis. And then about every 3 months, she and I made a decision that we're going to spend a day together, or maybe a day and a night together out of the house, just to have a special time together.
We did every 6 months.
Yeah, maybe every 6 months.
Since we got married, every 6 months we do that.
Yeah, so if again, just a day together, or maybe there's an overnight together, and that's really helped us stay connected and to build our marriage. So that's on the communication. I think we're good there. Okay, so the second word that we wanted to share is this idea of mission, of purpose. If you remember the helicopter is designed for a purpose. And I think a lot of marriages, if we don't in our marriage understand that God has designed us and our marriage for a purpose that's beyond us, that's bigger than ourselves. Because if we put all of the attention just on us, and if we are the purpose, if we are the mission, what we have experienced, and with a lot of other couples that we've seen, that mission typically fails.
Yeah.
Because we at first, yes, we just love, and it's, you know, all the things at the beginning, but at some point it just dies, right? We have to be about something more than just us. That's how God has designed us. God's designed us for the purpose of helping the world around us, of serving, you know, when we were young marrieds with a baby, we moved to Eastern Europe, we lived in Romania, we lived in Hungary to serve. That's been the nature of our relationship, that we're always on a mission, that we want the blessing that God has given us to be a blessing to other people. So we're always trying to find ways to give and to serve, and that strengthens us. It strengthens our marriage because we're about something more than us and about something bigger than us. And that's how God has designed marriage to be. But again, in culture and in the world, all the focus is on the relationship itself, all the love songs, all the ideas like you just have each other and that's all you need. That's a lie. It never works. So if you know the Dead Sea in Israel, why is the Dead Sea dead? Why does nothing live in the Dead Sea? Why does it have such a high salt content? It's because there's one river that's flowing into the area, but there's nothing flowing out. And so everything flows in, and over time it becomes dead because there's nothing flowing out. And so it's the flow, it's the mission, it's the purpose that helps us be strong together. Any thoughts that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I just remember when we first got engaged, our theme scripture was, "Let us glorify the Lord together." And that has really been helpful for us. Even when we have our issues, we want to get past those, not just to have a better marriage, which is great, but really to be able to be helpful for others in their lives.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. We're still trying to live out our purpose, and it helps. Prayerfully, it helps you. It certainly helps us to live that way. And the last word is just this idea of play. Play, having fun. Having fun. It was interesting, when we moved to Bucharest in 1994, one of the things that we did there, we were working with an orphanage and trying to help the children that lived in this orphanage. There were like 100 kids that lived in this institution. And they were all very underdeveloped. You know, they might be 6, 7, 8 years old, but some of them couldn't speak. There were a lot of ways that they were just delayed in their development. And it was interesting when we started talking to experts in the US, because we were like, what can we do to help? And one of the answers was, help them play. I'm like, what? I thought it was all about food and medicine, and it was those things. But we were told, help them play, because as they grew, they didn't have any play. They would just stay in their cribs, isolated from each other, and they didn't interact with each other. They didn't interact with adults. They didn't have like places to be curious and explore and develop their brains and develop their emotions. And so they were very undeveloped. And so we actually brought in toys and games, and we built a playground and a basketball court at the orphanage to help them to play, not just so that they can have fun, but because in the design of God, it's a part of how we develop. But as we get older, we can lose that. And in our marriages, we can lose that. I can lose it very easily because I can get very serious, and I'm like going to work and do and work and do and work and do. And then after a while, it's just like, ugh, who wants to be around this guy? But Caryn has been blessed with this playful spirit. And so she really is the strength in that. And I'm the one who has to more decide, I need to lighten up. I need to be more playful and have more fun. And when we visited Ireland a few years ago, we had this joke now because my personality changed a little bit and I became Irish Brian, and I was talking a little bit, you know, and walking around in a different way. She said, I like Irish Brian. Can we have more of him? So this idea of just bringing play into the relationship.
Yeah. So at one point, once our kids all left the house, which is maybe will happen with you someday. we were left with just each other. And I love hanging out with people because coming from a big family, I love just being with my girls, and we'd stay up late and watch fun things and blah, 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 blah. And when they were gone, I remember just the reality of that. I was sitting on the couch and I was like, oh, this is gonna be boring. Like I really was, and then I even looked at Brian and I'm like, who is he? And who am I? Like, we had to kind of start a new relationship without the children, right? Because that becomes so much part of our lives. And really develop that. And that's where we started really working on this idea of play, just figuring out ways to make our lives a little bit more fun when we don't have other people there to make it more fun.
So that's probably enough ideas for now. We'll have another session where we'll split up the men and women. But just what did we talk about here? We talked about how marriage is designed by God. He created us, man and woman. He created us the way that we are. He created our personalities and our differences. But He's created them to come together in a way that they make each other stronger, and we create something new, something more, if we come together in the way that God has designed. But it is a lot of work. We have to do our part. It's not just that we can just expect God to just make it for us. He expects us to open our Bibles, to get into the work, to get help from other people. We constantly have people in our lives where we talk about how we're doing in our relationship, things that are going well, things that are not going well. They support us, we support them. We're a part of a community like that. This church is a community like that. And so we thank God for that and invite you to be more a part of that experience as well. So that's our session here. I don't know how you want to do the next steps, Yvonne, but this is the end of this particular session.